Hello and welcome to part 9 of the inventory tutorial series. In this video we're going to be working on saving the player inventory. So you can see here if I hit load, the player hotbar now fills back up with their inventory. The backpack has the inventory in it as well. And if we go over to the chests, we can see that the chests have their inventory stored as well, which is what we did in the last video. So let's just get straight into doing this. Okay, so where we left it off last time is that we could walk around and pick up some tomatoes and potatoes, and then we could go over to our chests and we could access the inventory and we could put our tomatoes in it. Well, they were potatoes, but you know what I mean, and our tomatoes. We can hit save, come out, go back in and play. And then if we load, the items that we'd picked up get deleted. And then the potatoes and tomatoes are still there. But what we had left in our player inventory wasn't getting saved. And that's what we're going to work on in this video. Okay, so let's open up our chest inventory. And you can see in our chest inventory, we have this public struct, the serializable struct that we were using to save out in our save data. And we'd save the inventory system as well as a position and a rotation. And you can see that this derives from inventory holder, but so does our player inventory. This inherits from inventory holder as well. And we need to save the same thing. We need to save this inventory system. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take this script, and instead of calling it a chest save data, I'm going to just rename it to inventory save data, and I'm going to put it onto the inventory holder parent script. So I'm just going to rename our struct here, inventory save data. And I'm going to cut this from our chest inventory, and I'm going to place it onto our inventory holder script. So underneath the public class here, let's just pop that there. So the good thing about this now, the inventory save data, is, for example, you may have other types of inventory holder. You may have a mailbox that just takes in mail. You may have like a cauldron, which is technically an inventory holder, but it could only hold like potions or something. And if each of these things are placeable and craftable in the world, then we can just use this public struct inventory save data. And we can even use this for our player's inventory as well. But with the player's inventory, we don't need to care about the position and rotation necessarily, because that piece of save data would be included in a different saving and loading for like the player stat. You'll have a separate player save system which will have the player's position and rotation, like their location in the world, saved into that. And realistically, you'd have their inventory system probably saved into that struct. So you'd have a public struct player save data, and it'd have their inventory system, position, rotation, any stats that they've got on them, other stuff about like who they've spoken to, where they've been, etc. But just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to keep it all simple, and we're going to have this one struct, which is what we save inventories with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another constructor that doesn't care about position and rotation. So we can go and start a public inventory save data. So this is a new constructor, and it's going to take in the inventory system, which we will call inv system. And here we can say that inv system is equal to underscore inv system. Position can just be set to vector3.0, and rotation can equal quaternion.identity. So then over on our player inventory file, so we need to do what we did on the chest inventory. So we need to subscribe to the load onload game function in our awake method. And we should probably unsubscribe from it in on destroy as well. Then over on our inventory holder, I'm going to implement a method called load inventory, which can take in a save data. But I'm actually going to make this abstract. So private abstract void load inventory. And we've got an error here, meaning that the class isn't flagged as abstract. So we need to do a public abstract class. which we've called inventory holder. And we can make this protected. So it's a protected abstract void load inventory, taking in some save data. On our chest inventory, we just need to do protected override void. And the reason that we're doing this instead of having it just be a virtual void is that on our chest, we care about the position and rotation. On our inventory holder, we don't. So what I can do now is I can copy this function from our chest inventory. We can go over to our player inventory holder. So here we're going to paste in our load inventory. What we're going to do here is instead of looking into a chest dictionary, we're going to say data dot our player inventory dot inv system is not equal to null. Then we're just going to set our primary inventory system to the data dot player inventory dot inv system. So this player inventory is going to sit on our save data script. So if we go over to savedata.cs, you can see this is where we've got our string and our serializable dictionary for our chest dictionary. What we can actually do here is do a public inventory save data, and we'll call this player inventory. And then in our constructor, we'll have to say player inventory is equal to a new inventory save data. Okay, so let's go back over to our player inventory. And actually, it's not called inv system, is it? It's inv system with a lowercase I. That's my mistake. So we've called it inv system. Really, because they're public, they should be capital I's. We're sticking to proper naming conventions. Okay, so another thing that we're going to do is we are going to change how the player inventory holder actually works. So you can see here we've got a secondary inventory system, and this is essentially our hotbar. So it's the 10 slots that sit on the bottom of the screen, but that's just a bit clunky because we'd have to keep track of the player's hotbar and their backpack separately. So that's just creating two lots of data when there's not really a need to do that. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to get rid of the secondary inventory system just altogether, so we can get rid of all of this. I know it's daunting deleting lots of code. So with that done, we can get rid of our awake function, and instead of this Unity action here, we're going to say get rid of the parameter, and we're just going to call on player inventory changed. So when we load our save game, we're going to call this action. So all we need to do there is on player inventory changed. We can call this after we load in our inventory. And instead of this here, so if keyboard.current B key was pressed this frame, we're going to just swap this over to the on dynamic inventory display requested action, which sits on the inventory holder script. And this is going to take in a inventory system, which is just going to be our primary inventory system. And we're going to pass in an offset. So the offset for the player inventory is going to be 10. So basically, when we call the on dynamic inventory display requested panel, we're not going to show the first 10 items in the inventory because they're going to be the ones that are on our hotbar. And you can see that we're getting an error here, which means we need to change some things. So back on our inventory holder script, where we've got this on dynamic inventory display requested, we can also take in an int, which is the offset. So inv system to display amount to offset display by. And because we don't have this secondary inventory system anymore, we can get rid of this else if, and we can just have this add to inventory. And over on our inventory system, when we're calling the on dynamic inventory display requested, we don't want an offset, so we can just pass in 0. So now let's jump over to our UI script. You can see that the UI controller is having a bit of an issue because this backpack action isn't a thing anymore. And display inventory, we can get rid of this method. And inventory to display needs to take in an int offset. And we need to pass this offset through to the chest panel refresh dynamic inventory. I'm actually going to just rename this to inventory panel now, because it can be a panel for anything. It doesn't have to be just a panel for the chests. So inventory panel. And I'm going to add formerly serialized as, so it doesn't lose its reference. So you can see here it says formerly serialized as. Once we've recompiled the editor, we'll be able to remove that. If you want to know more about that, click the link up in the top right corner. I did a video on what this does. So passing through our offset here, we just need to go to this refresh dynamic inventory function method and actually implement the offset mechanic. So here we're taking in an int offset. And again, we need to pass this along to its final destination, which is this assigned slot method here. So im to display offset. And that needs to take an int. Our inventory, because this is an override, we need to do the same on the assigned slot abstract method here. So we need to pass that inventory slot in. We need to pass that it offset into that. And now, instead of starting at 0, we can start at the offset. So I equals offset. And then whilst the inventory display is less than the inventory size, we'll do all of the other stuff. So basically we're missing, when we start to assign the slots, if we pass in an inventory size of 50, because our player inventory is a size of 50, 10 of which are for the hotbar, and we're passing in a offset of 10, it's going to skip the first 10 slots of the inventory, which I should be able to show you here. So that should all be working. It doesn't look like it is. There's something wrong with our static inventory. And that's because we need to pass in the offset here, even though we don't use it. Okay, so that should all be happy now. So let's go back over to Unity. That was a lot of changes without testing any of them. So hopefully that will all work. Let's recompile. No errors in the log. Always a good sign. So I'm going to walk over to this tomato. We've got our 2 potatoes, and they're coming into our hotbar. As we go over, you'll see that nothing happens, and that's because we probably forgot to do something. So our player inventory size was set to 10 because we only had the hotbar and we got rid of the secondary inventory system, which is our backpack. So let's put this up to 50. Okay, so that didn't work. We got an error. That's because silly old me forgot to do something on our static inventory display class. You can see that we were looking for the amount of slots and we'd put in 10 inventory slot UIs. So this is an array of the actual UI inventory slots, and we were checking its length and making sure that it was the same as our actual inventory size, and logging an error if it wasn't, just as a failsafe. But we need to get rid of that now. And instead of doing int I equals 0, what we need to actually do is check I, say int equals 0, and whilst I is less than slots.length. So there is a potential issue here. And if you decide to have, say 5 inventory slots, you need to make sure you change that in the code on the player inventory holder, where we're passing in this offset. What you may want to do is to have a public, serialized field, private int offset, and we'll default that to 10. And let's, instead of hard coding that there, we'll just put in offset, and we can change this in the inspector. If you change the hotbar, so if we look at the player hotbar, you can see that we have 10 inventory slots in the script. So slots 10, that's these here. If you decide to only have 5, you just need to make sure that you change that on your player, the player offset here. And actually, if you wanted, what you could probably do is if we go over to our player inventory holder script, I'm actually going to put this offset onto the inventory holder main class. So we'll do offset equals 10. Let's make this protected so we can access it from our player inventory holder script. And I'm going to do a public int offset, a capital O. And this can be a property that returns the offset field. So now over on our static inventory display, what we can say is instead of slots.length, we can actually check the inventory holder dot offset. Okay, so with those changes done, we just want to go back over to our player inventory holder CS script. And the last thing we need to do is in a start function, so private void start, we just want to add to the save game manager. We want to get the data, the player inventory, and we want to set a new inventory save data, just passing in our inventory system, which is the primary inventory system. Okay, so back in the project, what you want to do is, because we've changed the way the save file is actually set up and we've renamed some stuff, we just want to hit delete. You need to delete your old save file. Which is important to get all of this stuff right now in the prototyping phase, because obviously you'd hate for players to have to delete their saves. Some games do have that in early access. You need to have save wipes and they get rid of your saves. So that's just something to keep in mind, that once you start changing the structure of what's actually saved out, you can't then load that back in. Or you can, but you'd have to, code for that and convert stuff. But let's just start walking over these tomatoes here and these potatoes here. So you can see that our hotbar got full. And as we go over the items on the ground, they start to fill up in the backpack. We can go over to the chest and let's put 5 tomatoes in here and some potatoes. Let's split that stack and put 2 in there and 1 in there. And then let's hit save. Let's come out, go back in. Let's load our game. So we'll hit load. So all of the items were collected, so they're now not on there. Over on this chest here, we've got the tomatoes and the potatoes that we put away. In our backpack, we've got them, but you can see our hotbar is missing. If we go over to our player, you can see on our actual inventory, they are there. We have those items, but they've not shown back up. And that's because the hotbar, unlike the dynamic inventory, it wasn't set to refresh when something changed. So when we load our save game, we just need to ask our hotbar to refresh, because obviously the data that's contained within our player inventory has changed. And that's quite simple. If we go back to the static inventory display class and in on enable, we can subscribe to player inventory holder dot on player inventory changed. And let's make a method called refresh static display. And let's just copy and paste that, and we'll change this to disable. And we'll change that to on disable. And we'll unsubscribe from that method. So in our refresh static display method, all we're going to do is take this out of the start function. And we can get rid of that. We don't need to call base.start. No. So we're going to take that out of our start function. We'll place it into the refresh static display script. And then we can call refresh static display from our start function. So back in Unity, if we hit play, we should just be able to load the game and everything should now be working. So let's load. You see that all the items were picked up. Our player inventory is all intact. This is everything that we had. We have our chests, which have the tomatoes and the potatoes in them, just as you would expect. So So I know code refactoring can sometimes make for a little bit of a hectic video. I hope you all followed along and it was okay. In the next video, we're going to be doing a bit more refactoring, unfortunately, and we're going to be looking at the way references to items within an inventory are stored. So what I mean by that is this is our save data, and you can see that the reference to the actual item data is we store how many of the item we have, but the actual reference to the data is this instance ID. Now you can see that if we build the game, so here we are in the built version of the game, and if I hit load, you can see that the items get deleted, and that's because they have a unique ID. It's not an instance ID. That's an ID that we've created and is unique. But you can see none of our inventories have any items in them. And that's because in a built version of the game, those instance IDs change between the built version and the editor version. And in patches down the line, they may change again. If you upgrade your engine, or sometimes just your project will reserialize and those instance IDs can change. And that means that the loading, whether that's in editor or in an inbuilt version of the game, would actually stop working and you'd break player saves. It's a bit of an oversight on my end. But after this comment from 322SS on the previous chest inventory saving, they've kind of flagged this as an issue. I did a bit of researching and I've found a way to fix that by creating an item database using scriptable objects. So in the next video, we'll take a look at how to implement that fix. It's very simple. But again, it's just a little bit of refactoring, so that will be what happens in the next video. But in the meantime, I hope you're enjoying the inventory tutorial series. It's been very good fun working on this. If you'd like the project files for this video or any of the other videos in the series, you can head over to the Patreon, which is linked in the description below. That's patreon.com/danposs. If you've struggled with anything in this video or any of the videos so far, you can join the Discord server, which again is linked in the description below. I'd be more than happy to help you there. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!